What is going on, everybody? Shwazy here, and in today's video we're going to be comparing the Ford Bronco with the Land Rover Defender. We're going to talk about the specifications, the features, the technology, of course the off-road capabilities of the two, and then we're going to finish off this video answering the question of which of these two should you buy depending on what situation you're in. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so we've got the Land Rover Defender and the Ford Bronco. Now, believe it or not, both these vehicles probably share more in their similarities than their differences. For example, both the Bronco and the Defender trace their lineage back several decades. The Ford Bronco started its roots back in the 1960s, whereas the Defender has traces from the Series 1, Land Rover from the 1940s, all the way to the Defender 110 from the 80s, and then the Land Rover Defender that technically started in the 1990s. But both of these have a long history, and you'll notice that in their design, they have a mix of throwback with modern, and that's kind of the reason why I like both of these. They also share in their capabilities off-road. In different ways, they are both extremely capable off-road vehicles. And then even when it comes to pricing, they do overlap a little bit, but we'll get to that in today's video. Starting off with the length of this vehicle, keep in mind that this particular car is the Defender 130, which is the long extended version of the Defender 110, and you've got about 13.4 inches of extra space behind that wheel well. So you're looking at a much longer vehicle. So if you don't like the proportions of this particular one, then the Defender 110 is the better option. And in terms of length, it's going to be a little bit shorter. This one being the longest version is around 211 inches. Now the Defender can be had in three different variants. You have the two-door version, which is the Defender 90, the four-door regular length, which is the Defender 110, or this long extended version, which is the Defender 130. Similarly, the Bronco can be offered in two variants. You've got a two-door version and the four-door version. And this one in particular, if you guys aren't familiar with the channel, is my 2021 Ford Bronco that I purchased in July of 2021. Now the length of the Bronco is about 191 inches. So between the Defender that I have behind this vehicle and this Ford Bronco, you're looking at about a 20-inch difference in length. But if you get the shorter version of this Defender, it's going to be very similar in length to the Ford Bronco, somewhere in the 190-inch length. Now let's talk about styling real quick. As I mentioned earlier, both of these have a throwback to the previous generation. So this Defender came out in 2019 as a 2020 model year, and you'll notice there are some touches here. They're reminiscent of the Land Rover Defender that came before it. You have still the same type of Land Rover front end with the LED headlights. You've got this fake aluminum front end to the bumper, kind of giving it a skid plate-like look to it. Then you got Defender badging over here all across the hood, and then coming over to the side, you know, there are touches here that are reminiscent of the previous generation, especially the boxiness of the exterior, where, you know, you don't find very many new vehicles aside from something like the Ford Bronco that has this type of square body to it. And then coming to the back, I like the fact that they've mixed, you know, a flat rear end with your typical tire attached to the rear tailgate, and at the same time you've got LED taillights that look really nice at night, giving it that modern touch. At the same time, looking at the Ford Bronco, very similar with that tire attached to the rear of the tailgate. The only difference is this one doesn't have a cover on it, but same retro styling, but with the modern touch of LED taillights. In fact, these taillights remind me a lot of the 90s Bronco, and I think that's what the style that they were going for. Coming over to the side, again, a very boxy shape to it, very different than a lot of modern SUVs, and you have coming over to the front a very similar styling to the old 60s Bronco, especially with these little markers over here that help you identify the edges of the vehicle, and the headlights are 100% a throwback to the first generation Bronco. And so you've got some really nice touches on both vehicles that are reminiscent of the vehicles that came before it. All right, now let's talk about pricing. Now the Defender is of course going to be a more expensive vehicle because this is technically a luxury vehicle, whereas this is not. The Defender 130, which is this extended version, starts at around $69,100 for the base S trim level. Now you can equip the Defender 130 with a supercharged V8 engine, and if you do that, it's going to go all the way up to $116,000. But if you're looking for the shorter length Defender 110, then you can discount those prices anywhere from about $8,500 to $9,200. Now, as I mentioned, the Ford Bronco is definitely a cheaper vehicle. You're looking at around a $31,300 starting price, all the way up to a $68,500 starting price for the Ford Raptor. So as you can see, they do have a little bit of overlap here, especially if you choose the 110 versus the Ford Bronco Raptor. Now, I'm not talking about markups here because both of them carry quite a bit of a markup. I would probably argue that the Ford Bronco Raptor has a little bit of a higher markup. So if you're looking for a well-equipped Defender versus a Bronco Raptor, you'd probably be looking at a very similar price point. Now, the nice thing about the lowest trim level of both these vehicles is they come with standard all-wheel drive and a 2-speed transfer case with a high and a low gear setting. All right, now let's talk about passenger legroom. Jumping inside the Defender, you're looking at just around 38.4 inches of space behind the first row. Now, the Bronco is in second place in terms of legroom, but not far behind. You're looking at just about 36.3 inches of legroom behind the first row. Now, headroom is where it becomes a little bit of a different story. In the Defender, in the front row, you've got about 41 inches of headroom. Definitely plenty of space for really any adult. But this Ford Bronco, being the soft top, you have a little bit of extra space above you. You're looking about 43.3 inches of headroom. This is a ton of space and definitely more than really any adult ever needs. All right, now let's talk about interior styling. And that's where you're going to notice the biggest difference between the two. You still have a little bit of rugged here, but it's definitely more upscale and more luxurious. Got soft touch materials over here. You do have a little bit of ruggedness with these screws that bolt in this plastic piece onto the door panel. You do have some exposed metal over here, which is the same color as the vehicle, but you do have soft touch material here. You got some nice aluminum touches, really cool looking speaker grills, some hard touch plastic here, but that's to be expected. And then taking a look at these seats, they're Windsor leather seats that are really nice in color. They're perforated leather, really soft and comfortable to sit in. And then jumping inside, this vehicle definitely has a more minimalist design on the interior. We'll talk about technology here in just a second, but you know, everything is super easy to reach. Everything is within arm's length. The design is very simple. Everything is bright and airy and open. You've got storage space over here on the left and the right hand side of the infotainment screen, even over here next to the steering wheel. But I do like the fact that you have this little grab handle here. We'll show you what that looks like in the Bronco because it's very similar. Same with over here on the passenger side. And then taking a quick look at the center arm console, you do have a 2-row type of floating arm console with some nice wood veneer over here, again with some of those screws that show off the ruggedness of this vehicle. And then jumping into the second row, also notice a big difference. Again, just those really comfortable seats over here, large, wide, 3 rows of seats. You do have a panoramic moonroof above you. You've even got rear 4-zone climate control. Now, this one is the first edition model, so of course you're going to have more bells and whistles than my Ford Bronco, but still, nonetheless, even the basic Defender has more features than what you're going to get in the Bronco. Even your third row is going to have padding over here on the side and even a sunroof above the third row seats. Now, of course, you can't get a third row in a Ford Bronco, but I just wanted to point out the level of luxury even in the third row of the Defender. Now, this is a test I can't show you in the Bronco because, well, it doesn't have a third row. The legroom in the third row of the Defender is about 31.7 inches, which is a pretty decent amount of space. That's about the same as like a mid-size pickup truck. All right, jumping inside the Ford Bronco, you're definitely going to get a little bit more ruggedness, not as much luxuriousness. So starting off with the door panel, this is a hard touch plastic. I do like the contrast with the sandstone color. This is a little soft touch material, but your armrest is a lot smaller than that in the Defender. Everything else is hard touch plastics here, although very similar screws over here screwing in this panel, although this is actually removable, unlike what you find in the Defender. Taking a look at these seats, these are very comfortable but very simple. Nice design to them. I like the contrast in color, and I can honestly sit in these just as comfortably as I can sit in those, but the design is definitely where the Land Rover takes the cake in terms of seats. Now, jumping inside, you'll notice that the cabin overall feels a lot smaller, which makes sense because that's a much larger SUV over there. But in terms of styling, this is definitely a more rugged theme to it. There's not as much storage over here. You still have, very similar to the Defender, you have Bronco embossed over here on the passenger side of the dashboard. So again, sharing in those similarities. But you know, over here, everything is straight, everything is rugged. Not as minimalist, I would say. You have what looks like more buttons over here, a little bit more stuff going on, especially with the buttons up here as well. But I can't can't say it looks really that much worse. It just looks a little bit different. And as you can see, you got those same little grab handles that you have on the Defender. So it's funny how they share in that aspect as well. Taking a look at the center arm console, it's a single tier. There's no two-tier setup. You just got your armrest over here and then some switches down here in a little storage compartment. So not as fancy, definitely not as big. Let's show you what the second row looks like. Again, more simple, not as advanced. There's definitely no rear zone climate control. In fact, there's no rear air vents at all. That's not even an option on the Bronco, which is unfortunate and kind of something I really dislike about the car. The seats are, again, very comfortable. You sit a little bit more upright in the Bronco than you do in the Defender. These ones do not recline backwards. You can recline the seats in the Defender. No sunroof, of course, but you don't really need one because you can fold this entire soft top back and give you an open air experience in the second row. Now, unlike the Defender, you do not have a third row of seats, but you do have a pretty good sized trunk. All right, let's talk about what's under the hood of both cars. So this particular Defender in front of me comes with a P400 engine. It's kind of the mid-level engine. It's a 3-liter inline-6 turbocharged engine with a mild hybrid system, and that output combined is about 396 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. It does 0 to 60 in just about 6.3 seconds, which is pretty decent. At the same time, your fuel economy isn't bad either. You're looking at 17 in the city, 21 on the highway. Also, all of that power is sent through a 8-speed automatic transmission, which is designed by ZF. Now, on the Defender 130, there are 2 other engine options. There's a detuned version of this engine, which is called the P300. That one has about 300 horsepower, 300 torque, 0 to 60 in the mid-7s. And then you can get a supercharged V8 now as an option for 2024. That one has just around 500 horsepower and 460 or so pound-feet of torque. And the V8 supercharged engine will do 0 to 60 in just about 5.4 seconds. Now, the Bronco, on the other hand, also comes with 3 different engine options. This one in my vehicle is the base engine. It's a 2.3-liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder that produces about 300 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque on premium fuel. You can upgrade this to the 2.7-liter EcoBoost V6 that produces about 330 horsepower but a whopping 415 pound-feet of torque. And of course, you can get the Ford Bronco Raptor that has a 3-liter turbocharged EcoBoost V6 that produces about 418 horsepower. Now, my Bronco will do 0 to 60 in just about 7.5 or so seconds, but if you opt for the Bronco Raptor, Car and Driver actually got it 0 to 60 in just about 5.6 seconds. So in terms of engine choices and power output and even acceleration, these two share a lot of similarities, and you can get them both equipped with a pretty quick engine, although I will say the supercharged V8 sounds a little bit better, and it'll probably do 0 to 60 just a smidge quicker. Now, unlike the Defender, the Bronco can be had with a 10-speed automatic transmission or a 7-speed manual. You do not have a manual transmission in the Defender. And fuel economy really depends on the engine, but it's as low as 17 in the city and as high as 22 on the highway. All right, let's talk about the technology, because both can come equipped with lots of tech. The Defender 130 comes standard with this all-digital 12.3-inch instrument gauge cluster display and standard with this 11.4-inch touchscreen. The Bronco, on the other hand, comes standard with this approximately 7-inch instrument gauge cluster display with a little bit of digital, a little bit of analog, and then a standard 8-inch touchscreen. Now, if you choose the Bronco Raptor, you can get upwards of 12-inch all-digital instrument gauge cluster display, and you can get a 12-inch touchscreen, so a smidge higher in terms of the size of the touchscreen in the Bronco. Now, both the Bronco and the Defender can come with up to a 10-speaker audio system, this one being Meridian, the Bronco being a Bose sound system. Now, both the Bronco and the Defender can be optioned with a 360-degree camera, but it is standard on this Defender 130, and it's only an option on the Bronco, which makes sense because of the price difference. But what I do like about the Defender is you have this 3D mode that allows you to almost float outside your vehicle and see what's going on around you. I believe the 360 camera in the Bronco is more similar to something like this. You do also have an off-road mode, which will allow you to see what's going on underneath the vehicle as you're driving. Now, Ford does have a front-facing camera for your off-road modes, but I haven't seen any feature that shows you what's going on underneath the car. Next up, wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto is standard on both vehicles. You can also get both optioned with heated seats for the front seats, but in the Defender, you also get ventilated seats for the front row And you can get heated and ventilated seats in the second row. But wait, there's more. You can also get heated seats into the third row. Unfortunately, no heated seat option in the second row of my Bronco. Both can also be had with a heated steering wheel. You can also get both of these vehicles with a wireless charging pad, but the Land Rover Defender also has a refrigerated center arm compartment. Now, one advantage that this Ford Bronco has is if your vehicle is equipped with it, you do have remote start on the key fob, so you can lock it and turn the vehicle on with just your key. However, with the Land Rover Defender, you have to use the application. Taking a look at the key, you don't have any remote start capabilities because you have to use the app. The downside to that is over time, they're likely going to have to start charging you to use this feature. For example, my wife has a Range Rover Evoque and she has to pay a subscription fee to be able to lock, unlock, and monitor where her car is located using the application, whereas this, you can just use it for free. Now, in terms of safety tech, they're almost identical. Both of these can be optioned with adaptive cruise control. You have blind spot monitoring, pedestrian detection, emergency braking, and both of these have a lane keep assist where it will slowly nudge you back into the lane, but neither one of these have any type of lane centering, which will keep you centered down the lane when you're driving on the highway. All right, now let's talk about the off-road capabilities of these two, and that's where it gets a little bit interesting. Starting off with suspension, underneath the Defender, you have a four-wheel independent suspension with air suspension on all four wheels. And so that means you can raise and lower this vehicle with just the push of a button. The Bronco, on the other hand, has independent front suspension, but a solid rear axle. And underneath here, you have position-sensitive Bilstein dampers if you choose the Sasquatch package. Now, in terms of which one of these is more comfortable when you're driving just on regular city streets, I'm going to say the Defender because it has independent four-wheel suspension and it's got a softer ride to it. This, on the other hand, is a little bit bouncier, more like a pickup truck because, well, this is a body-on-frame vehicle versus this one being a unibody construction. Now, in terms of off-roading, this one's likely going to be a little bit more capable with its suspension because you've got a solid rear axle in the back. All right, let's talk wheels and tires. The Defender, this one being the first edition, has 22-inch wheels. You're looking at a width of about 245 millimeters, and these are about 32 or so inches in size when you're talking top to bottom. The Bronco, on the other hand, has these rugged Sasquatch wheels and tires. These are the Goodyear Wrangler Territory MTs. The wheel itself is about 17 inches in diameter, but the entire tire top to bottom is about 35 inches. Now, the width of these is just around 315 millimeters. And as you can see, these are mud terrain tires meant to be a little bit more rugged and more capable off-road, but at the same time, these are going to be louder and less comfortable driving on the road than these. Now, of course, you're not going to off-road in 22-inch wheels and tires, but you can option for a different setup with smaller wheels. Now, currently, this air suspension is at its highest setting, and you can see it's actually pretty tall off the ground. Approach angle at this tallest setting is around 37.5 degrees. On the Ford Bronco, the standard Bronco has about 35.5 degrees of approach angle, but on the Sasquatch, you've got about 43.2 degrees of approach angle. Now, breakover angle is surprisingly better on the Defender. You're looking about 27.8 degrees of breakover. The standard Bronco, on the other hand, is about 20 degrees, but in the Sasquatch package, you're looking about 26.3 degrees of breakover angle. Now, departure angle is where it gets a little bit tough. Because this is the extended version, your departure angle is only 28.5 degrees. The Bronco, on the other hand, in the base trim is about 29.7 degrees, but in the Sasquatch package, you're looking at a 37-degree departure angle. Now, ground clearance is very comparable, but I'm going to give the cake to the Defender because this one has the adjustable air ride suspension. So this can have as low of a ground clearance as about 6 inches all the way up to 11 inches, which is the setting it's at right now. This, on the other hand, the base Bronco has a ground clearance of about 8.3 inches, but the Sasquatch, which is pretty much the same thing in front of you, is around 11.5 inches. Now, it's a little bit taller, but the disadvantage to that is if you have maybe little kids or elderly adults trying to get into the vehicle, you're going to have to add side steps, whereas this, you can just lower the suspension when you need it and raise it back up when you're going off-roading. Now, if you plan on taking your off-roader through a little bit of water, that's where the Defender will take the cake as well. You're looking at around 35.4 inches, so almost almost 36 inches of water fording capability, and using the infotainment screen, it'll tell you exactly how high the water is up on the vehicle. Now, don't get me wrong, the Bronco isn't bad either. You're looking around 33.5 inches of height in terms of your water fording capabilities. It's not quite as high as the Defender, and it doesn't really tell you exactly how high the water is up on the vehicle. Now, one advantage for the Bronco is you can get skid plates directly from the factory. I don't believe you can get skid plates from Land Rover for the Defender, but there are quite a few aftermarket fabricators that do offer skid plates for the Defender. That being said, if you do plan on lifting one of these vehicles, it's much easier to lift the Bronco with its body-on-frame setup than the Defender with its independent suspension and unibody construction. There are some lift kits out there, but they're very expensive and very difficult to do, whereas this is pretty cheap and pretty easy to do. Now, in terms of lockers, you do get a center locking differential on both of these. This, on the other hand, you can option with a rear locker, whereas the Ford Bronco, you can get a rear and front locker. You can also get a sway bar disconnect on the Ford Bronco. Now, both of these also have a ton of different drive modes, everything from eco to sport to slippery to mud ruts and to sand. This Defender, being a little bit more equipped than my Bronco, has about 8 different driving modes versus the Bronco's 6, and 6 of them are oriented towards off-roading. So you've got a grass, gravel, and snow, you've got mud ruts, you've got sand, you've got rock crawling and water wading as well. You also have a configurable one which can be used off-road as well. Now, towing capacity is where the Defender is a clear winner. This one has a max towing of 8,200 pounds, whereas the Ford Bronco is pretty light. You're looking at a max towing capacity of 3,500 pounds. Okay, so that is everything you need to know about both of these vehicles and how they compare. So to finish off this video, which one of these two would I recommend and why? Well, it's a very difficult question. To be honest, depends on how much money you have. Personally, I've been very impressed with the Defender 130. I've kind of fallen in love with it. Very easy to drive, very simple, very luxurious. It reminds me a lot of the Bronco, but in a more luxurious version. At the same time, the Bronco is a car you're probably more likely to take off-road because it's a little less expensive. You're not going to feel as bad taking the Bronco off-roading because even though it's still an expensive car, depending on which one you pick, it's not a luxury car, so it might be a little bit of an easier pill to swallow. Here's what I'll say. If you have an unlimited amount of money, I'd say pick the Defender, because at that point you're going to enjoy the luxuriousness of the interior, the better technology, the minimalistic design. It's just a more upscale interior as compared to the Bronco. But if you're on a budget and you're wanting to figure out which one of these two to pick, I'd recommend the Bronco, because this one you may actually take off-roading and it does a lot of things well. I mean, it's a very capable off-roader, possibly even more capable than this depending on which statistic you're looking at. And at the same time, you're able to save a little bit more money by picking something a little bit more basic, a little bit more simple. But you really can't go wrong with any of these. And to be honest, after driving this car for the last week, I know exactly why this is such a hot vehicle and why everybody wants their hands on one. It looks cool, it drives well, it's luxurious. There's really nothing wrong with it. I just personally wouldn't off-road a $92,000 vehicle because I'd feel bad getting it damaged. But let me know your thoughts on these two vehicles. Which one of these two would you pick and why? And if you are shopping for one of these vehicles, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on which one you ended up deciding to buy. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly videos. Also check me out on all the social media at Schwazy_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay Schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.